Hey, thanks so much. Yeah, so I wanted to chat. I'm going to go, I think, 20 minutes to talk to you about this, which is really about identity, right? We'll get into what trustless means in a few seconds, but I want to take you back in time. I want to take you back a few millennia to a village. Doesn't matter where, anywhere, a village. And this village, if you would lean out of one of the houses and shout, everybody would hear you, right? The chieftain is probably vital statistics. You know, if you wanted to have a town hall meeting, everybody would show up. You kind of know everybody by name. You may not like them, but you know them by name, right? And this is a really easy village to manage, right? Because everybody knows kind of what is going down. They kind of know what they should do and they shouldn't do. And if not, everybody knows about it, right? There is a threshold, right? There's this magic number where this village needs to promulgate laws and things to extend itself. At 150 people in the village, it becomes a little difficult to shout, right? And so at that magic moment, you need sort of narrative and mythology, everything that, you know, Yuval Noah talks about, you know, in his books, you know, with Sapien and others. You need to tie things together beyond the individual, right? So when you sort of have a family clan, that's fine. But when you get to be a city and you get to be a nation, then you need to promulgate things that go beyond the individual, right? You need to create sort of digital proxies. The same holds for business, a family business and startups. I'm sure a few of you have startups, right? Startups are fine when you can shout across the office. But there's this magic number when it becomes a corporation and then a multinational where you have to talk about values and you have to actually write them down. And you have to talk about, you know, what are the rules of engagement in this office and harassment laws and things like that, because you can't just say, dude, not cool, right? And so the whole point is that this has to, you have to create structures which in our world are digital, right? And you have to create this pillar that you can build things on. Because ultimately, everything we do in our own personal lives, in our business lives, in our school lives, is about becoming extensible, right? Taking things beyond the individual, otherwise you can't scale, right? So with the Industrial Revolutions, each one of them propelled us as a civilization, right? We managed with steam and electricity to go beyond where we were and extend our production capability. Obviously, with factories and automation, we scaled, we were more efficient. Mid-century with computational advances, we came up with the internet and everything that is foundational to your lives today, right? And now we're at a point, and I think you talked about it in the last panel, the fourth industrial revolution, right? All the things that we're talking about now, which will propel us into the new millennium. And really, what you have to think about is there's an organic algo, right? This is the vital statistics village, right? So I make certain decisions based on a certain, framework that I have internalized, right? And so I have an algorithm built in. And I make certain decisions. I make certain moral decisions. I make certain business decisions based on what's going on internally. But then you have a silicon algo now, which extends that, becomes a proxy to what you are, and it becomes a digital twin, right? And so with the ARPANET and creating all these nodes that allowed us to create networks and allowed us to create languages on those networks so we could communicate in a lingua franca globally. And then, you got, Tim Berners-Lee coming in and creating the structure for the internet as we know it. And on top of that, we had browsers so we can actually see the internet. And then on top of that, we developed applications so that we could do things in those browsers. And bam, we're here. And then we had to say, well, how do we control this? What is the way that we as algorithmic beings can interface with these digital proxies, right? And so you have to have some way of saying, I am me, this is what I want to do. And so you had these sort of rudimentary stabs at saying, look, sign in and I'll give you the universe, right? But the problem is that as you build that out, and you have networks that have more than just access. They have all this digital residue, right? And this digital residue is quite profound, right? I mean, if we take studies on Facebook, for example, right? If you have a work colleague, right? If that person was to go onto Facebook and randomly like 10 things, we would be able to know as much about that person as your work colleague. If they were to go in to their Facebook account and like 70 things, then we would be able to discern algorithmically basically what they're like and what their likes and dislikes are, equivalent to a friend. If they were to click on 150, now they'd be a family member. And this is the most astounding thing, is that at 300, we're married, right? It's crazy, really, if you think about it. And so there's a lot of digital residue that we leave as consumers in this world. And how do we, as algorithmic beings with decision-making in the physical world, interface with our digital proxies, right? How do you reconcile what we're doing, you know, in one of the huts in a village compared to what we're doing in this proxy interface where they can algorithmically discern our likes and dislikes equivalent to a spouse? And it's kind of scary. It's a little bit of an aha moment. And we had these epiphanies over the turn of the century. You know, when information was collected on individuals and distributed in a way that we didn't really feel very comfortable about. And so you had, you know, Snowden coming out with certain information which led us to question what our governments were doing. You know, we obviously had the bank debacle, right? Where we questioned really the accountability of the financial institution. These were sacrosanct institutions, right? Government, banks, huge amount of trust, right? But if you think of the word trust, trust is a double-edged sword. So if I say, I trust you, what does that really mean? Does it mean that I trust you, or that I trust you because I don't trust you? Trust is a relative thing, right? So I say I trust my bank manager, meaning I don't trust another bank manager. I trust my investment advisor because there are a lot of investment advisors I wouldn't trust, right? It's a sticky human thing. It's very, you know, physical algo-based, right? It's this idea that we as humans can discern things, and we don't do them scientifically. We do them based on this touchy-feely thing, right? So when you say you trust the bank manager, you're making a decision based on the fact that the world is untrustworthy. And this person you trust, or this institution you trust. So when you put your trust into organizations like Equifax, for example, and whether it be their fault or whether it be just the fact that we're living in a very different time and institutions have to catch up with security, the bottom line is we feel compromised. And the trust evaporates. And if you look at the rise of fraud over the past few years, there's just this asymptotic growth in fraud. And again, our digital proxy feels vulnerable, right? And so how do we identify ourselves as physical people versus this digital proxy that's out there on the web, on the blockchain? So that takes us all the way to Mr. Zuckerberg goes to Washington, right? And we're at an interesting juncture because in Europe there's GDPR, right? Everybody know what GDPR is? So privacy regulations are being promulgated as we speak. In Europe, that basically shift the onus from the institution back to the owner of the data, right? So now, as an individual, I should have control over my digital residue. I should have control over my digital proxy. And so there are a lot of institutions, such as Facebook, that are saying, wow, we have to change the way that we architect privacy, that we architect ownership of data, right? So, Facebook goes out and buys Confirm.io as an example, and they're a biometric technology which allows you to tether a biometric identifier, such as an interactive selfie or a fingerprint. It allows you to tether that to your identity. And Facebook is using that for a number of ways they're using that. But basically now, when you come in to your Facebook page, it can identify you and your images that are posted by friends, for example. And you now can go in and actively edit those images and take control of your identity and say it's not me, right? And then these are advances that the last panel talked about, right? And we refine this ability to tether the physical Gary, to the algorithmic Gary, right? And it makes this world a little bit more of a prosthetic, an extension of what we are. Right? And the way that that's usually done is that you try and create some sort of sovereign identity. So basically, you are sovereign of your own identity, as opposed to Facebook being sovereign of that identity, or Google being sovereign of that identity. So then you are sovereign of your identity, and there are many ways of doing that, and then third parties need to interact with your sovereign identity so that at any time you have the right to be forgotten. You can say, look, dude, I don't want to be there anymore because I don't want to be associated with that digital residue. I want to extract that from expunge it from your records, right? And that sovereign identity can happen off-chain. It can happen on-chain with the blockchain. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And it can happen, but all these challenges of how we manage that. What are the public keys and what are the private keys, and how seamless is it, right? So let's go to, I think we've all had this experience. We've all traveled, right? And what do? You travel and you walk into that hotel room, right? And what do? We say, hey, I got to put some things in the safe and I'm going to take some things with me. So usually we have a pile of digital identification. One of those things is going to be your passport, right? So do we put the passport in the safe, or do we put it in our pocket and go out to dinner? Usually we take the passport and we shove it in the safe, right? And then we go out to dinner with a card, right? And I changed the numbers, so and we go out to dinner with this card. And what happens? So I go into a restaurant and I pay for my meal. What does that restaurant need to know? It needs to know what? That I can pay for my meal. Good. That's what they need to know. And do they need to know that I'm Gary Schwartz? Do they need to know I'm Gary Schwartz? Not really. All they need to know is that I got some bucks. And that if they give me this food, or they give me this shirt, or they give me these shoes, or they give me this computer, and I walk out of their world, that somebody's going to pay them, right? That's all they care about, right? So it's really a token exchange. Now, what's interesting here, and David Birch talks about this a lot, and he's a bit of a personality, and you should sort of look him up on the web. But basically, there's a distinction between Gary with all this digital residue, and Gary, that has certain information, and the information that's required to interface with the third party. And really, the information required to interface with the third party is really just pass-fail. Are they good for that $1,000, or are they not good for the $1,000? And that basically translates into approve or not approve, right? And And there are lots of situations like that. And basically, there's this delineation between what you need to know and what you are as a digital proxy, right? So here you are. We don't know who you are, but you somewhere on the web. You're somewhere on the blockchain. And you have a physical identity, and you have a digital identity. And those are twins, and they symbiotically tied together by some validation, some attestation, and then somebody else needs to interface with that to make certain decisions. That's sort of how things work, whether that be a dating site or whether that be, buying a computer at the Apple Store. And so I have all this information, right? So that's what makes me me, and it could be, my diplomas. It could be that I actually can go to a certain level with my PADI certificate. Maybe that I play golf, and actually I don't play golf. I made that up. But the point is that and so that's what's wonderful about a digital identity. And so I have all of this stuff which makes Gary, right? And really, again, that pass-fail sort of information that I require, I don't have to tell somebody that I scuba dive if I need to tell them that I have so much money in my bank account. If I want to buy a beer, right, I have to say that I'm either over or under 18, or in certain places over or under 21. That's all I need to show. But what do? I take out my identification. I say, dude, take a look, that's me. And here's my name, and this is where I live, and here's my exact birth date, so I'm not so young. But I don't need that. I just need a pass-fail on beer, right? So the whole idea is not to create a sovereign identity. It's to extract the right logic at the right time based on the business utility of that decision. So take away the beer, and there are lots of companies that have solutions. I'm going to talk about specifically the blockchain, because we talked about that in the last panel, that the blockchain is maybe not so profound because it's just a thin layer of immutable data, but it's hugely powerful because that thin layer of immutable data changes the way we see the world, right? And so there are all these companies that have solutioning, for the identity of the individual and tethering that to certain decision logic, right? Shift, crypto cabin. And what I want to take you through is a bit of a journey in the next few minutes of how I see digital identity going down. So really, if I can biometrically have an attestation that Gary is Gary, so I do an interactive selfie, so then you can see that I'm not faking it because I'm smiling at the right time in the selfie. So they say smile, I smile. It's very difficult to fake that if I'm somebody coming in from another country as a bad actor, right? So I smile, I do a digital selfie, I maybe put in my Ethereum wallet, public key, I then put in some identity, right? And now I've got some sort of nugget of sovereign identity. And then I say, you know what, that all checks out. I go back to Colombia, I say, yeah, he did come here. I go in to do my KYC with the third party. Yeah, his passport's good. I've got all that attestation. I know that he's now an accredited investor, or that he can, his golf handicap is whatever his golf handicap is, if he really played golf. And then I now can put that information on the blockchain. But instead of putting that information on the blockchain as a sovereign identity, I'm just going to put the pass-fail stuff on the blockchain. So I'm just going to put a registry of 10 million names that say pass-fail 18. Right? And all I have to do at the club is now just ping the registry. So I'm not pinging the sovereign identity, I'm just pinging the business logic. And that the logic of tying things up based on business utility is a very profound thing. So now if I go to invest in an ICO and I want to, initial coin offering, and I want to pay something, and it's a security token, because everything should be a security token. And we'll be talking about that on a panel, I think. But that now, I need to be an accredited investor. So I can go to a registry and it can be pass-fail. There are different ways of using my identity with the technology that's coming up. And it's not based on just the management of it from an individual perspective. It's also the business utility and the fluidity of making those decisions. So basically, I can come in and I can put, 5 lines of Solidity, which is a programming language that allows you to write smart contracts on Ethereum, and I can say, ping the right database to say, are you over under? And you're either over or under, or you're not. And that kind of logic that you can build into your applications, into your services, is very profound, right? And so I was born in Zambia, and as we end this, I think I've got 0 minus 10 seconds. So I was born in Zambia, and look, it's a profound issue in Africa, in lots of places in the world. 2.6 billion people are invisible. So how do we repatriate them, right? In Malawi, which is right next to where I was born, only 2% have a paper certificate. 2%, and 4% are on Facebook. So we need to come up with a solution that's seamless. We need to come up with something that's extensible. And it's all about this trust, and we talked about that before. We don't want trust, because trust can come with this very unnatural and uneasy relationship with data collection. Really, we don't want trust. We want a trustless relationship. We want to say, I'm going to put my information on the blockchain, and there is no way that it can be changed, altered, and the decision-making logic is extracted so it can't be in any way have cookie crumbles going back to the original data. And that is trustless. Trust is a very archaic term. With the blockchain, we don't need trust, because we know that whatever happens is immutable and driven by consensus. So now we're in a trustless economy. So if you have logic to marry your algorithmic identity with your silicon identity, create a twin that's intelligently managed, we're in for a nice ride for the next decade. Thank you very much. I put up all my keynotes and whatnot on ifthingscouldSpeak.com. And if you want more information, I'm happy to chat with you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you.